At one point, Blink-182's album sold over 15 million copies. Now their latest album, 9, only sold 77,000. But I know this day and age nobody buys albums anymore and it's all about streaming. Their top song came out before Spotify even existed, let alone streaming in general. All the Small Things is at 713 million streams. Their best single off their latest album is only at 48 million streams. That is only about 6% of what their top song got. Now you could say that their style is dead or people have moved on from pop punk, but Machine Gun Kelly, which is produced by Travis Barker of Blink-182, he has songs with over 500 million streams, and that came out only a couple years ago. So what happened? Maybe it was the alcoholism, the drugs, or the once unbreakable friendship that fell apart that ultimately led to the fall of the band Blink-182. If you grew up in the late 90s, early 2000s, chances are you listened to Blink-182. At their height, they were selling out arenas, selling millions of records, but it wasn't just the ticket and the CD sales that made this band massive. It was their onstage antics that set them apart from the rest of the current bands of the day. They spoke to a new generation and it resonated with the youth of the day. With that in their music, they started a movement, the pop punk movement. Whole lifestyles were created around the band Blink-182, from what you listened to even what you wore. But where did it all go wrong? Now it's easy to say that the fall of Blink-182 is when Tom Delonge left the band, but there's more to it than that. Blink-182 started how most bands start, friends getting together, getting drunk, and just jamming together. After getting kicked out of Poway High School for being drunk at school basketball game, Tom relocated to Rancho Bernardo High. There he performed a song called Who's Gonna Shave Your Back Tonight at the Battle of the Bands competition, where he was introduced to the drummer Scott Raynor. Then through his friend's girlfriend, he was introduced to Mark Hoppus, who just moved to San Diego to attend college. Mark desperately wanted to be in a band with Tom, so to impress him, he climbed a lamppost which he fell from and broke his ankles. Because of that, he was on crutches for 3 weeks. In 1992, the trio began practicing together in Raynor's bedroom, spending time writing music, seeing movies and punk concerts, and playing practical jokes on each other. The trio had many different bands in the beginning, including Duct Tape, Figure Eight, until DeLonge rechristened them Blink. Hoppus's girlfriend at the time was annoyed by his constant attention to the band and demanded that Mark make a choice between her and the band, which actually resulted in Hoppus leaving the band not long after its formation. Shortly thereafter, DeLonge and Raynor borrowed a 4-track recorder from a friend and collaborator, Cam Jones, and were prepping to record a demo tape with Jones on bass. Hoppus then broke up with his girlfriend and returned to the band. Fly Swatter, a combination of original songs and punk covers, was recorded in Raynor's bedroom in May of 1993. Now this demo is pretty bad, but you can actually kind of hear the beginning sounds of Blink-182 that we know today. The band began booking shows and were on stage nearly every weekend, playing at the Elks Lounge and the YMCA centers. DeLonge called clubs constantly in San Diego asking for a spot to play, as well as local high schools, convincing them that Blink was a motivational band with a strong anti-drug message, in hopes to play at their assembly or at lunch. They played their very first show at a bar to just one person and a bartender. After 3 songs, the bartender told them he had enough and gave them a Snapple for their troubles.
The first Blink show ever, we played at this biker bar in South San Diego, and it was literally the bartender, one patron, the 3 of us. We played one song, and the guy said, "Can you please turn it down?" We turned down. We played another song. He said, "Can you please turn down more?" We turned it down. We got a 3rd song in, and he said, "You know what, guys? Let's just call it. Let's just call it. Have some Snapple. You guys earned it."
Yeah.
Their biggest dream was to headline a venue called Soma, which was an all-ages venue in downtown San Diego. The band managed to get some money together and record their first official release, Buddha, which was a collection of every single song they have written up to that point. They recorded it in 2 days. From there, they started to develop a larger local following. They caught the eye of a local records label, Cargo Records, which offered to sign the band on a trial basis. The band went off to record their next record, Cheshire Cat, released in February of 1995. It was recorded in 3 days and consisted of a few new songs and some of their old songs off of Buddha that they re-recorded. Their first single off that album got some airplay from a local radio station, 91X. During this time, there's an Irish band also known as Blink that threatened to sue them unless they changed their name. The record label kept on pressing them to get them to come up with a different name, and so they just randomly came up with the number 182 to put at the end of their name, and so that's how we get Blink-182. The next step was the band hired a manager, Rick DeVoe, who managed larger bands like NoFX, Pennywise, and Offspring. From there, they got the attention of Tahoe Booking Agency, which spread the band across the states. Things started to go really good for the band, and in March of 1996, there was a bidding war with different labels for them. They decided to go with a major label, MCA, which was actually the start of their first major problem. Scott Raynor, the drummer, wanted to sign to a much smaller label like Epitaph, but he was voted against. After that, he only felt half invested in the band. They released their next album, Dude Ranch, in late of 1996. Their single, Damn It, was a massive rock hit, and Dude Ranch over time ended up going platinum. But not everyone was happy with the new direction the band was going in. But it's very weird. They were now getting more fame and money than ever before, but Scott was feeling less invested in the band because he saw Blink going into a more mainstream appeal, and he wanted to keep Blink more indie and less pop. After having to compromise on the label decision, he found it harder to compromise in other decisions, which made tensions grow more in the band. Tensions grew to its peak at the Snowcore tour. While in Nebraska, they had a huge fight. Shortly after, Scott suffered a tragic loss and had to return home for a little bit, forcing the band to find a fill-in drummer for the remainder of the tour. That's where they got Travis Barker, who learned the entire 20 songs in about 45 minutes before their first show. And not only that, he played it flawlessly. Scott returned to finish the last few shows of the tour, but the band drama had grown substantially. As a result of that and other things, Scott started drinking heavily. It got so bad that the band told him to go to rehab or he would be out of the band. He asked for the weekend to think about it, and when he came back, he said he would do rehab. But Mark and Tom said it was too late and kicked him out of the band. I think with Scott is he didn't really want to be in the band anymore, or more just felt indifferent about it. Think about it. If the band comes to you and says, hey, you need to quit drinking, and then you respond with, I need the weekend to think about it, that doesn't show that it's a very high priority for you. And mix that in with, trying out Travis Barker as their drummer. I mean, Scott's a decent punk drummer, but Travis is like one of the best drummers ever. So once they tried him out, it was like a no-brainer decision. It's like, maybe we should go with Travis Barker, who wants to be in the band. The other one just wants to get drunk all the time. According to Tom, this is what it was like when Travis first started playing with him. It was like, now anything's possible. We can play any kind of song. Mark and I instantly played better because we were keeping up with someone who played everything perfectly. So we became a lot better at that time. We were nowhere near as good as Travis, but we got better. I think once Mark and Tom started playing with Travis, they realized that Travis could take him to the next level. So they're just looking for any excuse to kick Scott out, and then his drinking just kind of made that decision really easy for them. They wrote the song Man Overboard kind of about this situation. So they continued to tour with Travis as their drummer and went back in the studio in 1998 to record their biggest album of all, Enema of the State. The album went on to sell 15 million copies and went 5 times platinum here in the United States. They won multiple awards, started a new wave of pop punk, which inspired so many other bands and kids. Their biggest song to date is All the Small Things, which has over 700 million plays on Spotify, and it was released over 20 years ago. They followed that massive success with another huge successful album, Take Off Your Pants and Jacket, which peaked at #1 on the US chart and went to sell 14 million copies worldwide and went 2 times platinum in the States. But this is where things kind of took a turn for the worst, and this is where I think the beginning of the fall of Blink-182 started. This album starts to show signs of the shift in their music. They wrote the entire album, but when their manager heard it, he said they didn't have a single hit song on the album. Both Mark and Tom got furious and said, you want a single? I'll write you the cheesiest, catchiest, throwaway summertime single you've ever heard. Mark went home and wrote Rock Show in 10 minutes, and Tom the same with First Date, which both became their most successful songs on the album. So this is kind of where the fall started, because Tom and Mark were approaching their 30s. No more kids just having fun, being in a band and going to school. They were maturing adults, and they wanted their music to mature as well. But they were put in this box trying to keep Blink-182 the same as it was before. Tom especially had trouble with this. He felt so bummed out while recording Take Off Your Pants and Jacket, as he felt he had grown out of this phase. But those songs is what everyone wanted him to play. So he started a little side project called Boxcar Racer. At first it was just songs that he could write for himself, but it started to become more than that. He got his friend David Kennedy to help with the record, and then he got a good amount of songs ready to record. Tom asked Travis to drum on the album because he didn't want to pay a studio musician. Because of this, Mark felt left out. They had many conversations about it, and Mark wanted to be part of it, but Tom didn't want this to turn into just another Blink thing. The album went on to be a moderate hit, and they even toured it. But when it came time for another Boxcar album, Tom disbanded the band. As he said, it was the best and and worst thing for Blink-182. Tensions were now high in Blink-182 between Mark and Tom. Part of them thought Blink-182 was done and it was over, but they talked it out and decided to do another album. Tom said he felt he was put into a box and didn't like it while recording the group's previous album, Take Off Your Pants and Jacket. I was kind of getting bummed out in the studio. It was probably my fault because I never said, but I just wanted to get in there and try things out. But you feel like you can't because the band is paying for the studio time. Also, Tom was tired of feeling like he was just in some pop band singing songs for kids. He wanted to be seen as a legit musician and respected guitar player. So they agreed to take Blink in a new musical direction. The results of that was Blink-182's self-titled album, which sold pretty well at about 7 million copies worldwide. That was half of the previous two albums. Most of that was garnered because of their massive hit, I Miss You. This album had positive reviews and took Blink in a whole new direction. This was the start of the new Blink-182 sound, and gone was the old style and sound. Tensions in the band began to start up again because Mark was having difficulty accepting the new direction Blink was going. The band stopped communicating with each other entirely after their 2004 tour. Tom wanted to take a break from touring and focus on his family. He also felt that Blink-182 wasn't allowing him to have the creative freedom he desired. He wanted to be seen as a serious musician and felt that if he stayed with Blink, he'd always be seen as a goofball that wrote teen pop songs and said fart jokes. He felt like if he even took Blink in a more serious direction, it wouldn't make a difference because they were so tied to that image. Ultimately, that led to Tom leaving the band and Blink-182 going on indefinite hiatus in 2005. Shortly after, Tom started a new band, Angels and Airwaves, and they released their first album. Mark and Travis started Plus 44, but it didn't have that much success. Then in 2008, Travis Barker was in a plane crash and nearly died. The band got together and spoke for the first time since their breakup in 2005. They talked it out and laid the groundwork for another tour and another album. Things were looking pretty good for Blink-182 fans, but that was very short-lived. Although they managed to record another album, the entire process continued to be dysfunctional. Tom would often quit and then come back the next day. They recorded their entire album separately in their own home studios. The result was Neighborhoods, which saw little chart success, and their label reported as saying they were disappointed by the sales numbers. They planned on doing another album with a studio booked and a new label on board, and everything was in place. Then they got a message from Tom's manager that Tom had left the band indefinitely to pursue non-musical activities. That was the last time the band was all together, because in 2005 they replaced Tom with Matt Skiba of Alkaline Trio. With Matt in replace of Tom, they made 2 more studio albums which saw moderate success, and they continued to tour. But each album was doing less and less in terms of sales and streams. They are still a massive band with lots of history and fans, so they'll continue to always to play big, huge venues. Now Blink-182 is still making albums and still going on tour, but their biggest song from their album 9 had 50 million streams. And around the same time, Machine Gun Kelly came out with an album which has 500 million streams. Now some say pop punk is dead, but I disagree because there's a revival of pop punk. So you can't use that as an excuse as why Blink hasn't been doing so well recently. Back in Blink's heyday, whatever they came out with was a massive, massive hit. Now everything just kind of goes by the wayside. In my opinion, the fall of Blink-182 took place when they're recording Take Off Your Pants and Jacket. Not because Tom started Boxcar Racer, but you can see a shift in their music. They weren't seeing eye to eye on the new direction they wanted to take Blink, which made Tom feel creatively shackled to Blink-182, and this kind of put a bad taste in his mouth. So that's kind of the fall of Blink-182. I put it in 2 categories. You have Blink-182 from Take Off Your Pants and Jacket and before, and then the self-titled album is the kind of new sound, which is carried all the way through to their current album 9. But there is hope on the horizon. Could it be a rise again? Well, Tom is back in Blink-182, and they're recording a new album and going on a new tour, which I already have tickets for. They came out with their new song, Edging, which I've heard probably about 50 times now, so I have a good handle on it. It is not like their old Take Off Your Pants and Jacket before stuff. It sounds more like their self-titled. My only hope is, Tom said the reason he came back into Blink-182 again is because Mark had cancer and it put things into perspective. Well, that was the exact same thing he said when Travis got in his plane crash and almost died. So I hope that he doesn't end up just doing the same thing again. And in Travis's tell-all book, he said that Tom basically would come back to Blink-182 when he needed money, and then he'd get all happy and stuff, and then when he got his money, he just kind of gave up and didn't really care anymore, and that's why they broke up again after Neighborhood. So I'm hoping with Travis Barker being on this album and producing a lot of current pop punk bands, I'm hoping he has a lot more influence on this upcoming album that Blink has, and I hope it kind of goes back to their old style a little bit, or at least has a few songs like that. I would really appreciate that. But I imagine it's still going to sound like the new Blink sound that we currently have. So even though I don't think Blink-182 will ever hit the heights that they were back in the early 2000s, or even their music sounds similar, I'd rather have some Blink than no Blink.